David, thank you so much for joining me today. So, the new promotional campaign that the National Pork Board is launching, uh, called Taste What Pork Can Do, what makes it unique among commodity-driven marketing campaigns?
Sure. Well, thanks for asking. And I would say the really this acts up a story that starts back in 2023, whenever I came to the organization. And one of the things that had already been started at that time by our board of directors was the build out of our business intelligence team, as we call it today, our data and insights engine. And so the board of directors realized that really to move into the new generation of pork, if we want to call it that, a successful business that was able to be dynamic and change and understand how to position itself for the future needed to be built on a substantial amount of data. And so we built out a data and insights platform at the National Pork Board, which is uniquely different than anything we have ever had in the past. And as a result of that, we also embarked on a consumer segmentation study. So that consumer segmentation study we call Consumer Connect was about a year-long project where we took an immense deep dive into the consumer of pork. And that also includes the future consumer of pork. And so the question here is what did the consumer segmentation tell us, and where are we at risk? And our data clearly points to there is an immense need for the long-term positioning of pork to focus not only on who our existing consumers are, which are primarily the boomer generation, the older generation in this country as well, but also the focus really needs to be on Gen Zs and Millennials and what drives them. And so when you think about the non-negotiables with Gen Z and Millennials in food and specifically in pork, the data clearly points to three things. There's three things that drive the consumer, and that is flavor, so taste and flavor. Two is balance, which ties into human nutrition. And three is convenience and versatility. So we took all of the segmentation, we took the data we had, our board charged us with a focus on domestic demand, as did our producers. And as a result, we embarked on building an entirely new brand strategy that was very data-driven. So all of that culminated with our agency partner as well into the build out of our brand strategy, the consumer testing of our brand strategy and our taglines and our creative, and really led us down this path to ultimately where we are today, which is tagline and brand launch. So when you think about this tagline, Taste What Pork Can Do, it ties in taste and flavor. It ties in the versatility of pork, taste what it can do. It can move beyond traditional holiday meal. It can move beyond breakfast. It can move beyond the occasional barbecue across the entire portfolio of products that pork has to offer. And it can build a relevant position with consumers in the future. So this wasn't created in a silo. This was built on data and built on consumer testing, and now we are at launch. And probably the only other thing before your next question is something unique about this tagline is that it does have the word pork in it. And people may find that interesting because what we want is an unapologetic position for pork. But in the consumer testing, it was very clear that this tagline came very high to the top in comparison of anything else. And pork needs that unique identifiable information or reputation. The data told us that very clearly. So in other words, it can't be mistaken with anything else. Taste What Pork Can Do leaves you really understanding that this is truly about the category of pork and nothing else.
You mentioned that some kind of generational changes in what consumers are looking for in their food products were kind of behind this effort. Can you tell us a little bit about how those consumer preferences are changing and what that means for pork and pork products?
Yeah, yeah, it's a great question. So, one thing we know certainly is that younger generations, especially these Gen Zennials, right? They think differently, they shop differently, they cook differently, and generally think differently about many different things, and that is especially in the food category. So I mentioned those non-negotiables, but the other really product specific data says that they don't think about pork always as center of the plate as other generations do. They don't think about this as a pork chop, for example, with sides on one side and the other, traditional eating. Instead, they oftentimes think about pork as an ingredient, which is great because that offers us up to a variety of different items. We are having a successful run in the ground pork category right now, up 17%. And when we think about pork as an ingredient, I'll give you an example. It's no longer just cut specific with these generations. It's also thinking about cuisine. Oftentimes, when you look at these younger consumers and they think about what they're going to consume for dinner, it's not, are we going to cook a pork roast? Are we going to cook a pork chop, right? It's, are we going to eat Asian, Mexican, Italian? They're thinking about cuisine. They're thinking about eating ramen. So, or just as an example. So when we think about that and this approach, it's got to be something that resonates with them, because the most important thing we've got to do is change the relevance with younger consumers, because our data very clearly demonstrates that younger consumers are eating significantly less pork in the category than what older generations are, which means that could potentially lead to long-term slippage in consumption. So this is about reversing that trend for the long-term position on behalf of our.
So, mentioning that kind of generational trend away from eating pork as maybe younger consumers, parents or grandparents may have. That said, are there any particular items, like say bacon, for example, in the pork product category that are proving to be kind of popular with shopping demographics?
Yes, yeah, thank you. And absolutely, there are. This ties directly into our brand strategy. And I would say that these value added items, the further processed items, bacon, you mentioned that, pizza toppings like pepperoni, ham, sausage, those categories are very relevant. And the reality is that there are consumers who don't know that many of those items that are one of their everyday favorites, they don't know that that's pork. So this approach, the reason I say it ties into the brand strategy is we internally talk about this as a whole hog approach. And what we mean by that is being able to really celebrate what consumers already love about pork. And let's think about some of those value added items, but then transfer that knowledge into the fresh category, because fresh is more at risk than is the processed or value added categories. So this is about a strategy to bring them along a journey to actually understand, if you like eating bacon, have you tried ground pork? Have you tried that in a pork dumpling, right? So again, tying it into cuisines, and we know that that transition in our brand strategy is the best approach to really bringing them into an entire category. The previous campaigns that we have ran at National Pork have almost exclusively focused on older generations, particularly baby boomer generation, which wasn't always the older generation, right? It focused on that generation, but also we're very heavily focused on fresh and not going across the broader category. So we did this process of brand strategy in partnership and support of the broader industry. So we had a group called the Marketing Advisory Group that was made up of producers and states, as well as our board members, so state representatives from our associations, and as well as the packer processor community. Because this needs to be an approach that's not just about what the pork board is doing. This needs to be an approach that ties into the broader national strategy for promoting pork in the U.S.
Tying into the consumer interest in cuisines and also fresh products, kind of what cross-promotional opportunities do you see possibly being related or growing from this effort?
Well, one thing that's important to note here is that this will be a mostly digital approach. So the bulk of this will be a digital approach of actual consumer marketing. So we're going to focus very specifically on high population states. So think about, if you take the consumption and you overlay that with population, 80% of the pork consumption in this country is done in 20 states. So those aren't always large pork production states, right? When you think about California, Texas, Florida, New York, other very high population states, that will be a major focus of ours. I often use that analogy of saying, you've got to fish where the fish are, right? And that will be part of it. But also when we think about cross-promotional, this campaign had to be big enough and broad enough and bold enough that we could also use it in food service and we could use it in retail. So while we have a consumer component, we also have this as a component of the efforts we are doing to work with food service companies. A lot of innovation starts in food service. Certainly a tremendous amount of volume is moved there. And then the bulk of volume is sold at retail. So we're working with strategic retail partners across the U.S. That includes some in the Midwest as well. As we get to launch here, and we're looking at actually rolling out Taste What Pork Can Do, this will be about aligning with their strategies and also doing some cross-promotional work with them to make sure that we are trying to elevate the entire pork category.
Is there anything else that you would like our audience to know about this promotional effort?
Well, I think that probably the most important piece that I would wrap with is saying this was really built on data, as I mentioned earlier. So this is a brand strategy and approach that we haven't taken in the past, and it is an unapologetic position. We say that on behalf of our producers quite often, of saying this is really a rally cry for pork. So it's something to get excited about. But this is about leveraging the broader business. So again, think about food service, think about retail, think about consumers. We're looking at this as a long-term approach to addressing domestic consumer demand. And so a long-term approach means you've got to take a long-term, bold strategy. And this won't be fixed in 6 months or a year. This is something that we will keep pushing on year after year to drive this domestic market very similarly to the way that we have addressed the promotional activities we've done in international for the last 30 years, where we've had tremendous success. Now, if you just look at a fact, if you go back 30 years, we were a net importer of pork. And you fast forward to where we are today, and we are a net exporter of pork at about 30% of our total production. So when you think about that split of 28 billion pounds of product, we export about 8 billion pounds. 24, we were up on volume, up on value, but domestically, we've got 20 billion pounds of product to consume. So this is about making sure that we are taking a global approach to our marketing strategy.
Well, thank you very much. I appreciate it.